How many years of education does it take to become a doctor? How did our guest on today's show get started investing? And how in the world did she find a missing savings account and Roth IRA that were both in her name? We'll answer these questions and more on this, the 92nd episode of the DoughRoller Podcast.
Welcome to the DoughRoller Podcast, where the best thing money can buy is financial freedom. We help you make more, spend less, and invest the rest. And now your host, Rob Berger.
Whether you're just starting out, buried under a mountain of debt, or well on your way to financial freedom, this is the podcast to help you take your finances to the next level. Hey, everybody, this podcast is sponsored by Betterment, the most preferred automated investing service. Betterment has cutting-edge technology to optimize returns, minimize taxes, and save you time and money. Join over 34,000 customers who have already streamlined their portfolio management at betterment.com/roller. That's betterment.com/ROLLER. So today on the show, we have another DoughRoller podcast listener. Her name is Stephanie, and she has just a great story to tell, and the focus is on investing. She has been investing on her own in a retirement account and at work, a 403B, very similar to a 401k. And she's been investing in IRAs and now recently started investing in taxable accounts. And we cover a lot of territory today. We cover everything on, how did she find her first mutual funds? How did she select them? You've probably been there. You start a job, you look at the 401k, and there are 30 options, and you think, my goodness, now what do I do? Which ones do I pick? I can remember when I was just starting out, I'll tell you the way I picked them when I first started out. I looked at their 10-year average, and I just picked the one that was the highest. Probably not the smartest way to pick a mutual fund, although it would have been worse off if I had not invested at all. But so we talked to Stephanie about how she did it and what she's learned. We talk about expense ratios. Boy, we talk about Roth conversions, backdoor conversions, investing in taxable accounts versus tax advantage or retirement type accounts, and just a lot of stuff packed into one interview. We talk about her investing tools, one of her favorites. We talk about some of the books and other resources that she reads. And so just an interview that I think you'll really enjoy. And, if you're new to this podcast, interviewing all of you, the listeners, has been sort of a new chapter in this podcast. I started out about a month ago, interviewed Kate and Trevor, and have had some others on the show since then, Natalie, and then today, Stephanie. So, if you have a story to tell, if you have a success story, maybe you just have some questions. Maybe you don't have a success story yet. Maybe yours is coming. But you want to just discuss some questions. It can be as short as a 5 or 10 minute call, and record it and play it on a podcast. And as you'll notice, a lot of people don't want to give their last name. Fine. I got no problem with that. So, I tell people before we start the interview, you can, disclose as much or as little as you want. Some people are more comfortable disclosing maybe a little bit, but not too much. Perfectly fine. But if you have questions and you think other people could benefit from them, happy to get on the phone with you, discuss them, record it as a podcast, and have you on the show. Today, though, we've got Stephanie, a doctor from Oregon, and it was just a really fun interview. And, here's her story. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Hi, Rob. Thanks so much for having me.
I appreciate your time. As I mentioned before you came onto the show, you've been listening to the podcast, and we started emailing back and forth on investment topics, I guess going back to April. And just one thing led to another, and we had to work out our schedules, but I'm grateful for you to take some time from your busy day and to share with folks how you invest and what you've learned. Why don't we start out? Just give folks a little bit of background, as much or as little as your background as you'd like to share.
Sure. I'll give you the snapshot, I guess. I'm a physician, but I got here kind of maybe an unconventional way. In college, I studied engineering, biomechanics, which I think is actually excellent preparation for medical school. It's sort of teaching you critical thinking skills. But I always knew I wanted to be a physician. My dad's a physician. I really love the field. And I went from college to medical school in Boston, and had a fantastic time. Medical school is actually a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but you're learning so much. You're working with great people. It's very exciting. And but medical school is, as you know, very expensive. And I was extremely lucky to have parents who could help pay for college. And during medical school, I actually did take out some student loans. I had subsidized and unsubsidized Stafford loans. And the medical school I went to had both research assistant positions and teaching assistant positions that would help cover the cost of tuition for those years. So I think for maybe 4 semesters of med school, I probably had my tuition paid by working, which is a great deal, by the way. And then, of course, the last 2 years, which is in medical school, is when you are in the hospital doing rotations. There's really no time to do anything except for those rotations.
Right.
And I finished medical school, and I started residency also in Boston. And I could not afford to pay even, I think my loans went into forbearance rather than deferment. The deferment period ended, I think, 6 months after I finished med school. And at the time, I didn't actually even know what forbearance versus deferment was. I was completely, blissfully unaware of the rules of how loans worked.
What is the difference?
Well, deferment is when they're not accruing any interest. So they give you a 6-month grace period, and they're deferred while you're in school.
Yep.
So at least the subsidized loans, I think the unsubsidized are always subject to interest. I could be wrong on that.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. So deferment is where they defer the interest. You're not accruing interest.
Right. And the forbearance, you don't have to pay the interest. You don't have to pay the loan, but it's accruing interest the whole time.
Right.
So when you do start paying, there's a lot more to pay.
A very important distinction.
Oh, yes. And one I learned later.
Oh, you did? So at the time you didn't appreciate that distinction. Okay.
I have to tell you, my dad and my brother actually are both very financially savvy, and I think they assumed that I was equally financially savvy, and I was not at all. I remember the day after I graduated from medical school, I bought my first car, I bought my first house, it was actually a condo, and I suddenly was a physician. I had an MD after my name, and I remember thinking, wow, I'm a grown-up now. I've really made it here. And I remember thinking the mortgage was probably the thing that made me feel the most grown-up, finding yourself to 30 years of
Isn't that funny? Yeah, I felt the same way when I got my first credit card. It's funny how your attitudes change. How were you able?
I have to say, I'm still finding things that make me feel like an adult.
How were you able to get a condo as soon as you graduated?
So actually, that's interesting. I used a combination of, you're going to laugh at this, my baptism bonds. I'm Greek, so a baptism is almost nearly as large as a wedding. But the traditional thing back when I was a kid was you got bonds as gifts, and they were all mature, I guess is the word.
Yep.
But really what I used also was what was in my Roth IRA, the contributions. And when I say my Roth IRA, I mean the Roth IRA my dad opened on my behalf. Whenever I worked in high school or even in, like, sort of the summer jobs I had in college, my dad would match what I earned up to the limit that you could put into the Roth, and he would put it into the Roth for me. Mm. And, he told me about it, but again, at the time I was completely blissfully unaware of what that meant. But that money had accrued in years, and I was able to take the contributions out to help with the down payment. So between that and my baptism bonds, and I think my parents gave me a gift of $5,000 to help me.
So it's fair to say you had a lot of help.
I did.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. There was no way I could have done that without
a
lot of help and a lot of foresight from my dad, really.
But you were also, you were working hard. I mean, you had to do a 4-year degree in engineering.
Yeah.
And then you had medical school was 4 years, right?
Yes, exactly.
See, lawyers don't have to be as smart. We only have to go 3 years. So you did 4 years of medical school. And then how long is residency?
Oh, residency depends on what kind of doctor you are. I'm a subspecialty within internal medicine. I'm a lung and critical care doctor.
Okay.
So residency in internal medicine is 3 years, at least currently. Surgery might be 5-6 years. Each specialty has a certain amount of time before you're prepared. And then the fellowship that I did after residency is what made me a lung NICU doctor, and that was another 3 years.
Wow. So is that the typical course? You have undergrad, you have medical school, you have residency, and then do most doctors then go through some form of a fellowship?
So if you want to be an internist, you don't do fellowship. That's the basic. If you want to be a general surgeon, you do surgery. If you want to do OBGYN, you do OBGYN residency. If you want to be a cardiologist, which is a subspecialty of internal medicine, you do a fellowship, or a kidney doctor, or a lung doctor like me. If you're a surgeon and you want to do vascular surgery, that's another fellowship on top of that.
So you did 3 years of residency and 3 years of fellowship.
Yeah, that's why we like to call ourselves professional students.
That's 14 years if my math is right. 14 years of.
Yeah, and then the whole time, I mean, you do get paid as a resident and as a fellow, not hugely, but you sort of feel like a student the whole time. You're still training. And my brother, who of course he's in finance, he went to college and had a job right away. He was sort of shocked at how little I understood about workplace retirement accounts and everything. And I was like, I've never had one because I've either been a student or I think under the tax law when we were residents, we were considered something like apprentices. You know, in fact, we got a FICA refund a few years ago. There was a big suit against the IRS for taking FICA out of our paychecks because of the fact that we were, quote, I don't know if the word is apprentices, but we weren't wage employees at the time. That's a whole other story we could talk about.
Okay. So just before we move to your investments and how you've, you know, like you said, you came out of residency and fellowship and your background was not in finance. And so I kind of want to walk through all of that. But I'm curious, when you were a resident, like what was this? I've heard that, you know, the shifts can be whatever. You're there 2-3 days. And is that true or is that just urban legend?
It's better now. There's the group that governs all of residents in the United States came up with work hour rules conveniently right after I finished medical school or residency. But now there's an 80-hour maximum work week. There were no restrictions when I was a resident, and sometimes, particularly on busy blocks like in the ICU, you'd work 90 to 100 hours.
Wow.
Which, looking back, is just insane. We would be on call every third day, which means Monday you come to work, you work a whole shift. Tuesday you come to work a whole shift, and the whole shift might be a 12-hour day, mind you. Then the next day you come in and you're there for 30 to 36 hours overnight to the next day.
So it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. Not every rotation's like that, just so you know. I mean, you have outpatient rotations where you're more 8 to 6 or something, 8 to 5.
Right, right. So before we get to your investments, one last question. Do you have an opinion?
Sure.
Do you have a strong opinion about the Affordable Care Act?
I don't know if I have a strong one. I'm still waiting to see how it's going to work. I do agree with you. I think one of your podcasts you mentioned that the whole no pre-existing condition clause was absolutely necessary. I can't believe we made it this far without it. I have friends who are in their mid-30s, women friends, who were refused insurance because they had an abnormal pap smear 12 years ago. And that's just unacceptable. Yeah. And the more we learn about medicine, the more everyone is going to have a pre-existing condition. Yeah. You know? So,
yeah, the thing there is, I think it was it's an important part of what needed to change. What I don't like about the way it changed is that the costs are not very transparent.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. I totally agree. Yeah, patients ask me questions. And I will say, so in Oregon, our, what is it called, the exchange where you get your insurance, it was a huge fiasco, but finally sort of everyone got on board. And I will say, because I'm at a university hospital, and we give a lot of free care. I mean, we take care of people with zero insurance, and that's what university hospitals do. Yeah. We've definitely seen a lot more patients who are now enrolled in our Medicaid, which is great because it's a lot easier to get people the services they need when you have even a little bit of insurance.
Is Oregon one of the states that increased the Medicaid limit?
I don't actually know the answer to that. I don't want to say the wrong thing. You know, the idea, I guess, which we'll have to see if it works behind the Affordable Care Act, is if people are insured, they'll actually go to the doctor for preventative care. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, that's the theory.
I will say, I will grant you this, that we do, I mean, I work in an ICU, and we definitely see patients who are very poorly insured show up very, very sick for things that, you know, probably should have been seen sooner. Right. But I don't know that there's a direct correlation between, I have insurance now, I'm going to go to my doctor. I mean, people are busy. They have other reasons to not go for primary prevention.
Right.
So,
right.
We'll see.
Interesting. Okay. Well, let's head down the investing path. So I know from your emails that your first retirement, I guess, was a retirement plan at work was a 403B.
Yep.
Which is basically like a 401k. There are actually some historical differences, but so a lot of listeners have been there. They get the new job, they sign into the 403b or 401k, and there's a list of 10, 20, 30 investment options. In their eyes, they glaze over. So how did you figure out how much you were going to invest? Maybe you just maxed out your 403b, but more importantly, what you would actually invest in. How did you figure that out when you were just getting started?
So it was actually kind of difficult because, I moved across the country. I had my first, as my brother puts it, real job. And we had two different retirement plans because we had two different payers at the time, which is now gone. We had one with Diversified and one with Fidelity. And so I had two separate groups of funds to choose from. And when I first moved here, the hospital I work for has a financial advisor that is on salary and that all new hires can basically meet with if they want to. And he was actually quite good at sort of laying it all out for me and giving me my sort of options. But really, my brother, I joke with him, my brother sends me emails saying, talk to your financial advisor about this. And I say, you are my financial advisor, right? And he sort of walked me through a bit of it, basically telling me the whole idea behind retirement accounts is no one's responsible for your retirement but you. He said, Social Security is great. It may or may not exist the way it does now in the future, probably not the same way. So if you want to get to retire, if you don't want to have to work till the day you drop dead, you really need to be thinking about this. And he gave me some articles from the Wall Street Journal, and I read some of Susie Orman's books. She has a very, very basic one called Women and Money, which it's embarrassing to think how little I understood about finance. It sort of starts with, like, what is a checking account? What is a savings account? But those sort of things tell you about compounding and how that works. And I'm a scientist, so yeah. I know math.
Did you find her book, Women and Money, to be helpful?
I did. Yeah. I mean, again, very, very basic, but that's exactly, sadly, where I was in my early 30s. My brother, these are things everyone else sort of figures out in their 20s, but when you're in medicine, you live in this sort of insulated little bubble where you're a student for 14 years.
And, your brother's advice about, nobody's going to be responsible for your retirement but you is tremendous advice. Couldn't agree with that more.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way. I mean, honestly, he kept saying little things like, we should get you in the market soon. I was like, yeah, someday. And I was like, oh, wait, it's not I should be, it's I must be doing this.
Right.
It's really not an option.
So when you made that realization, you read Susie Orman's book, Women and Money. You've got Diversified and Fidelity to choose from. So how did you pick those first investments?
So I went through and I looked, honestly, my brother did what you had told people on your thing, is look at the expense ratios. And I started looking at some of them, and this is how he explained it to me, and I don't know if this is helpful, but he said people often pick a fund that they think is doing well. And, just because it's done well in the past doesn't mean it's going to do well in the future. But he has to remember that the expense ratio is, let's say it's 2%, is taken off of what your earnings are. And I was thinking, so if you earn 10%, if the fund goes up 10%, you lose 2% out of the 10%. He goes, no, it's 2% out of 10%. So you actually only make 8%. I was like, oh, so they literally skim a huge chunk. I mean, when you think about that, if you have an expense ratio of 2% and you earn 10%, you've lost a fifth of what you should have earned.
And that's true, by the way, if the return was negative 10%. They still take their 2% cut.
Wow, I didn't even think of it that way.
Yeah.
So he explained it to me, and so for me, he actually turned me on to index funds.
Right.
And
Good.
We didn't have any index fund options.
Not a single index fund. Okay.
Not in Diversified. In Fidelity, we did.
I see.
And that's why I was really excited when we moved. We got to move everything Fidelity, because I think Fidelity has done a fantastic job improving our options each year. But the first year, I think the lowest expense ratio in my other funds was more than a 1.5%.
Wow.
Which by my standards nowadays is like crazy high.
Highway robbery. That's what they call that.
Yeah, that's what I feel like.
Okay, so you got everything over to Fidelity. And still,
Yeah,
how'd you
and
pick your
fidelity.
investments?
So what I did was I probably have, I don't know if this is more aggressive within stocks than most people, but I have about 40% in international
Okay.
and 60% domestic, maybe 35, 65 when I think about it. But I found, let's see, an S&P index fund, and I'm trying to log in right now back into my Fidelity account, but it's their Spartan one.
Yep. That's their S&P
and then
500 index
some
fund.
Mid and small cap ones. They have a mid cap and small cap. I think actually the mid and small cap ones are Vanguard's mid and small cap. Total stock market, I think, is one of them. They had them offered, and of course Vanguard has very low expense ratios.
Right.
So that's what I did for the domestic ones. At the time, I'm going to tell you honestly, I had no idea what mid and small cap meant. I mean, I look back, I'm like, wow, I can't believe how little I understood about that.
I mean,
at one point,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, when I started investing, I didn't know the difference either.
Well, I'll tell you, and I will tell you this. This is an embarrassing little side story. I emailed my brother one day when I was brand new learning. He's sending me articles, and I think I emailed him something like, "What's the difference between a mutual fund and a money market account?" He's like, they start with the letter M, and that's about as much as they have in common. He's like saying, what's the difference between like an apple and a giraffe? He's
Right,
like,
right.
No. And so, that's when he started sending me a little more basic articles so I could get the lingo down. And,
Yeah.
He's
so
patient with me.
It sounds like you started with an asset allocation plan. You wanted 60% domestic, 40% in international. Now, and then you to pick specific investments to execute that asset allocation plan. You were focused, it sounds, primarily on index funds.
It's pretty much it. I mean, right now, I will tell you, I log right in, and I have Vanguard Total International Stock. I have Spartan 500 Index, Vanguard Mid Cap, and Vanguard Small Cap. And each of those is about maybe 20%, because the rest is in my brokerage.
Right. And how much was everything in stocks to start with, or did you have anything in bonds?
No, it was completely in stocks. I didn't know what bonds were. I remember reading asset allocation things, but what my brother was telling me is, you're just getting in the market right now. You've got a 30-year horizon, 25, 30-year horizon. You want to be in stocks.
Okay.
You have time to have risk, And this was all in, 2007, 2008 was when I got my first.
Just in time for a bad market.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So you're just starting out. You're 100% stocks. You've got a lot of years to invest. Curious, when the market tanked, how did you react?
Well, market went down and it crashed, and my brother basically reminded me, weekly even, you want the market down when you're just getting in. That's the best time ever for it to be down, because you're basically getting everything at a bargain rate. And so, if anything, I had the ability to actually put more into my 403b, like a greater percentage of my salary at the time. So I actually tried to increase. I certainly, by no means, I maxed it out at this point, but I tried to push a little bit more into it. And again, it's much easier to be calm during a crisis when you don't have very much in the market.
Yeah.
You've only been in for a year. You're not watching hundreds of thousands of dollars go away. You're watching 5,000, 10,000, which is still a lot of money, but it's not nearly as scary, I think, as it would be if it happened today. I'd still be very nervous. Although I have to say, going through that immediately after getting into the market taught me a very strong lesson about riding it out and about sticking with your asset allocation.
Right. It is a good lesson to learn, and if you've gone through it, you don't ever forget it, and it really teaches you a lot about who you are in terms of as an investor.
There were people I work with at the hospital. I remember the market was down 30%. They said, "Well, we're taking everything out," and I was like, "Whoa. If you take it all out, you've lost all that money, and you're not going to get it back." And they're like, "Well, what if the market keeps going down?" I was like, if you really think, is this the end of the United States? Basically, if the market never returns, we're sort of talking about a time where it's the collapse of our economy and our as a nation. And I'm like, I don't think we're there.
Yeah.
And I'm not betting on that one. And if the market does collapse, completely, and the country goes to pot, why is money going to be helpful? Like, what makes you think money is going to mean anything if we're in that kind of a situation?
Yeah, and if you think historically, all of the things we've been through, whether it's the depressions, world wars, and the country bounces back. They're not easy times, of course. I imagine the friends that took their money out of the stock market later regretted it.
Yeah, a lot of them did. I think a few of them managed to get back in at a good time and didn't, But that's, like you said, I think I don't know if it's a podcast I listened to last night, one of the ones from the last few weeks, you're mentioning, if you're very, very lucky twice, that will work for you.
Well, that's right. In each market cycle, you've got to guess correct twice when you pull it out and when you put it back in. And over a lifetime of investing, you're going to have to do that many, many times. And I'm just not that smart.
Right.
So you mentioned,
I'm not either, and I don't have that kind of time.
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned that you invest in some Vanguard funds through your Fidelity account. How do you do that?
Oh, there are options. They are well within the 30 options that we have.
Okay, that's interesting.
Let me see if I can log right. Oh no, yeah, I think what happened is, luckily there are a lot of smart people other than me at this hospital. I put that in there, but there are a lot of very smart people I work with who are more vocal and have been bugging our HR to improve our options, and each year they do. They've made better options. Let me see if I can pull it up here. We have 30 different options. Here they are. So we have the Fidelity Freedom funds, which are the targeted retirement funds.
Right.
If you're retiring in 2000, 2005, all the way up to 2050, I think. Gosh. And then there's the core index array, which includes the Spartan 500, the Vanguard Mid Cap, the Vanguard Small Cap, the International, Vanguard Total World Stock Market, and the Vanguard Total Bond Market. And they're all Signal shares, which are similar to Invest Admiral shares, but not quite.
Right.
And then there's the core active array, which has social equity investments, the Contra Fund. I have to say, I don't understand what half of these are.
Right.
But I used to be in some of these, but they have much higher expense ratios.
Right.
And honestly, that's one of the bottom lines for me. Unless something I'm sure is going to beat its index, which I'm never sure of, I stick with index funds.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned you started out 100% stocks. Are you still at 100% stocks?
Not exactly. So now I have 90% stocks and 10% in what I call other, and that includes real estate and bonds.
REITs and bonds, okay.
So I have some REITs, and actually I have REITs, and I have something from Vanguard that is not a REIT, but it's a real estate fund. It's not technically a REIT because we're not allowed to have REITs within our. It's not an option within my brokerage, let me say it that way.
Okay.
There's some rules about what is and is not allowed to be in the 403B.
Yeah, your connection broke up there just a little bit.
I don't understand.
I missed that, but...
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Better?
Better now.
Oh, I'm saying there are different options within. The 403B is not... the brokerage link that is associated with my 403B doesn't have access to REITs.
Okay. And for those listening,
it does have access to a Vanguard fund.
Yeah, and brokerage link is a Fidelity term. It's a way you can invest in things in your 403B other than what your employer lists for you. Gives you access to other investments. Is that right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And okay.
Yeah, and it works just like a brokerage account, only with limited options.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, I know you also opened up and maybe this was a continuation of what your father had started for you, but you had a Roth IRA. Where did you have that, or where is it now, and how did you pick investments for your Roth IRA?
So I think it was originally, my Roth IRA was originally with a bank in Boston that bought, it was a bank that was bought by Bank of Merge, and the Suite bought them, and then Bank of America bought them. So suddenly I have a Roth IRA with Bank of America, and I ended up moving it to Fidelity just to consolidate.
Okay.
So that I had my accounts with them. And then I had a traditional IRA, and that one ended up with Vanguard.
Okay.
So I had a traditional IRA with pre-tax money with Vanguard and a Roth IRA with Fidelity. And this year, I actually converted my traditional IRA to a Roth at Vanguard. So now I guess I have 2 Roth IRAs.
So on the conversion, your traditional IRA to a Roth, will you owe some taxes?
I will.
Okay.
I was going through. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, how'd you make that decision as to whether that was a good move to make or not?
It was tough, and I remember listening to your podcast talking about conversions and backdoor loss. I really had to get my head around the fact that I can't just if I have a pot of money that's traditional IRA, that's money I'm about pre-tax money. I can't choose to just convert the pre-tax due to the pro rata rule you explained. And for me, having to do a sort of a percentage every time I wanted to convert to Roth was really complex, and it's something I didn't have to do for years. So before I put any money into a post-tax traditional IRA, what I did was I converted the whole thing over. And it was under $20,000. I think it was close to $15,000, which is, I'm going to pay a chunk of taxes on that. But it cleans the slate for me in a way that gives me a lot of peace of mind at night. I don't have to think, like, what's going on when I want to convert this. It's going to be 40% this and 60% that. It's done. So everything now outside of my workplace retirement account is in a Roth. And this year I managed to put some post-tax money in traditional at Vanguard and immediately convert it to a Roth the next day.
Great.
And I'm happy as a clam.
Great. Hey, Stephanie, let me, I'm going to stop the recording for a second, and then
Sure.
You're breaking up off and on, and I think the problem is with the way I'm calling you, which is through Skype, but it's the only way I can record. So let me, I'm going to hang up on you and call you right back, okay?
Perfect.
All right.
Sure. Hello?
Hey, we'll see how this works.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. But I'll just pick up where we left off.
I remember you edited out something funny once, and then you left it in on one of the podcasts.
Right, yeah. Maybe I'll leave all this in so people can get a real feel for the real life behind the microphone.
Oh God.
So how do you track all of this? Do you use tools to track all your investments? Because you've got your 403b. Is your one Roth that you converted still at Vanguard?
Yes, and actually, I also have a 529 plan for my niece.
Yeah.
At Vanguard too, so that's another account that I have there.
And do you have any investments in taxable accounts?
I as of this year, I do, and that was one of my financial goals. Every year I come up with some basic financial goals, whether it's save money, whether it's down payment for a house, pay off my student loans. And this year it was to dip my toe in the water in a brokerage account outside of my retirement account. And I started listening to your podcast right around tax time. And of course, that's when everyone starts thinking about money. And that's when I sort of got myself into, and I have wanted Ameritrade.
And why did you pick Ameritrade?
I actually had already had one there. I don't know how I opened it up. I had a money market account with them. And since I already had it with them and they have brokerage options, I figured it was just simple to do it that way. So it was really more of it was already there. I think I opened a money market account with them during some promotion where you get, they matched you from a certain amount of money. This was years ago. It was just sort of sitting there quietly.
So is this TD Ameritrade?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And what is your investments in your taxable account? I mean, are they mutual funds as well?
No, they're ETFs.
Okay, ETFs. But you're not investing in individual stocks?
Not yet. I haven't again, like I said, dipping my toe in. I've never bought individual stocks.
Yeah.
And ETFs to me feel like buying a slice of an index fund, which I'm much more familiar with.
Right.
And Ameritrade, I think all of the different groups have their list of commission-free ETFs. So I chose within the commission-free ETFs.
And why did you pick ETFs as opposed to just sticking with mutual funds?
Well, it seems, and I have to listen to your podcast, that they're more tax efficient.
Yep, they
can be.
And
that's something that I'm still getting my head around. And I know you sent me a great email about how to find a tax cost ratio at Morningstar.
Yep.
I actually used that before I put anything into my Ameritrade, which was great. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have so many tools that I've gotten from you. It's crazy.
I'm trying to think. I mentioned that tool, I think, in yesterday's podcast. I'm losing track of numbers. I think it's podcast 85. But yeah, ETFs generally are more tax efficient than mutual funds, although an index ETF, which most of them are, compared to a sort of a mutual fund index like at Vanguard or Fidelity, the tax differences, they're pretty close. Right. But
that's what I found out.
Yeah.
I have to say, I love at Vanguard how they have, you can look up a fund and it'll automatically say the comparable ETF is this one. It's on the same page.
Isn't that nice?
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
All right. So you got a lot going on here. You got TD Ameritrade, you got Vanguard, you've got Fidelity. So I got two questions for you. One is, I mentioned the tracking, so why don't we start there? How do you track all this, or do you not use any tools to track it?
Well, I'm glad you asked, because what I've been doing for years, up until I started hearing your podcast, is I have a spreadsheet, and then I told them a little bit of a math nerd, but I have a finance spreadsheet where I basically, wine ads, which you talked about, which is great. I sort of made my own little budget with this is coming in, this is going out, and it has like a running timeline where this is when my paycheck's going to come, this is when I'm going to pay my Amex bill, my car payment, whatever. And and I sync it up. I make sure I have it once a week or so, just to make sure everything is accounted for. And then on this spreadsheet, I have a section where I put in what my balances are in all my accounts. So Ameritrade, I have a Capital One 360 that's where I save for my house down payment.
Right. Right.
And my Fidelity accounts, my Vanguard accounts, everything like that. And every once a week I go in and I put all the numbers in myself. Now I use Personal Capital.
Oh, okay.
Which is so nice, because you were talking about looking at your asset allocation across different things. There's almost no way for me to do that by myself, trying to say, well, in my Ameritrade it's 90% X and 10% Y, and then in my Fidelity it's 30%, 40%. It was crazy. Now I use Personal Capital, which is fantastic.
Right.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I use
it. I've had all year.
I'm anal about this. I log in almost every day. I'm curious, how often do you actually log in and check your Personal Capital to see how?
Oh, daily, absolutely. It's an app on my phone.
Right.
On my way back from work, it's after the end of my work day is well after the stock market is closed. And I always like to see it's the ME index, which tells you how your investments are doing relative to the market.
Right. Sometimes I'm happy to see that. Sometimes I'm not.
Yeah. But it's always nice to sort of get an idea.
Yeah.
What's going on.
Yeah. The U index, right?
Yeah, the U index, you're right. It's the U index, not the ME index. Right?
And it's funny, they calculate that in an interesting way. It's kind of involved, and I won't go through it all. I spent some time actually reading that. Maybe I'll see if someone from Personal Capital will come on the show and explain the U index, because it's a little complicated. But yeah, it compares your returns to the S&P 500 and or whatever. Really.
International and bond index.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the other things I really like is not on the app, I think, but on the actual website, which I do not go to the website nearly as much as I do the app, is it tells you your expense ratio across all your funds.
Yeah.
And I think you commented upon that. And I think I managed to get mine down to under 0.1%. What is it? 0.09% is where it is now.
Holy cow, that's tremendous.
Yeah. It's almost all index funds.
They're practically paying you 9 basis points. That's fantastic.
That's what I like to hear.
That is fantastic. I'll have to look mine up. I'm sure mine's not quite that good. I think it was under 20 basis points, and I was patting myself on the back. But man, now you've set the new. You got the gold standard there. I mean,
well, I think back though to when I had my first ones, and the expense ratios were like 1.5% to 2%. I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. All right, my second question I wanted to ask you. So that was how you sort of track all this. You got different accounts going on, like I know many people do. The second one was, do you worry about or think about what's called asset location between what you invest in your taxable account versus what you'll invest in your tax advantaged accounts?
I do now. Again, I didn't have brokerage. I didn't have an investment account outside of my retirement accounts until this year. So I didn't really pay any attention, because all of this was growing either tax deferred or tax free, depending if it was a Roth or not.
Right.
But now that I have some in there, I think I actually sent you an email, and you answered some great stuff about sort of the tax cost ratio and other things about what should be not in my retirement account, what should be. And like, I think real estate and bond funds that give you a lot of dividends are better off in my retirement accounts, where I'm not going to have to pay taxes on all those dividends. And things that are much less likely to give me dividends should be in my taxable account, so that I don't have to make that much more. And I'm a buy and hold person. I think I've sold once in the last 3 years. I'm basically just putting money in, and if I want to rebalance, I usually change what's going in.
Right.
Sort of, on the other hand, of course, when you're almost entirely in stocks, there's not a lot of rebalancing to be done.
Yeah. I mean, and if you could, well, first of all, rebalancing in a tax advantaged account like a 403b, 401k, or IRA, you can move things around without worrying about the tax consequences. So that's easy. But yeah, I oftentimes rebalance by just I'm doing that now. I'm slowly trying to move a little more into bonds. I'm at about 18 to 20%. And I want to get up to about 25, given my advancing years. But yeah, I try to do that with contributions, particularly, to try to avoid tax consequences in the taxable accounts. But yeah,
exactly.
REITs by law, REITs enjoy certain tax advantages, but they do that to qualify for that. They've got to basically distribute, I think it's 90% of their income in the form of dividends. So that's why they generate. There's really a couple, not to dive into REITs so much, but there's two things. One, they throw off a lot of income that if it's in a taxable account, it's going to hit you each year, each April 15th. And that's, I guess, the biggest thing. But the other thing is they tend to be highly leveraged because they don't have retained earnings. They can't keep their money to invest in a new property. So where do they get their money from? They got to borrow.
Right.
So, but yeah, REITs are one that throw off a lot of interest. Obviously, bonds or dividends or income, I guess. Bonds can do the same thing. So good. So you mentioned student loans. Are you still paying on your student loans?
So I'm happy to tell you that I am not. I paid them all off about a year and a half. Maybe it was 2 years now.
Okay.
That was a big step. In fact, so when I moved out here, when you finish residency or fellowship, whatever, you're training, you get your first real job and your salary goes up because you're no longer, working 90 hours a week and getting paid very little.
You're a real doctor.
And my salary, I'm a real doctor, brand spanking new. My salary more than doubled when I came out here. And the best piece of advice I think someone gave me when I finished, which I think, I wish most doctors or all doctors would have to hear this advice, is live like you did when you were a resident with a few extras. And save or use that money to pay down your student loans, to do the things you need to. Because if you immediately start spending all your salary, you're going to be in the same position, with loans and debt. And we all have debt. I mean, very few people, I'm trying to remember anybody I knew from medical school who graduated without debt. It's nearly an impossibility with the cost of medical school nowadays.
Yeah, sure.
And it's only gone up.
Yeah.
I mean, medical school.
How much is medical school? Much is medical school a year?
Oh, gosh. I don't even know anymore. When I was there, it was in the 30,000 range.
Yeah.
And that was just 14 years ago, maybe.
Yeah, I'm sure
it's
got to be over $50,000 at the top schools.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't mean to cut you off. I was just to give people a kind of a frame of reference.
It's hard to, let's see. Private schools tuitions are 50,000.
I know law school is above 50,000. I went to Boston University. I think its tuition now is 55. I think I paid 15, but that was in the 1800s. So, so you move out. So the goal was maybe enjoy a few extra things, but try to spend money like you did when you were in your residency and fellowship. Yeah,
I still had my beater car. I mean, I just sold my car this past year. It was a 14-year-old car, which I loved. But I did not get a new car when I just moved out here. The last thing I wanted was another loan. And it was a serviceable car. It was great. And I put extra money that I could get to my student loan. And actually, at the time, this was before I sort of understood about maxing out my 403b. So I was putting money towards my student loan. And then I think I told you in one of my emails, I actually came into some what they call found money. I went to missingmoney.com. And there was this old bank account that my mother had opened for me when I was a child. I think I was 8 or 9 at the time, that we had sort of forgotten about. and the states are obligated to hold on to property and money in your name in perpetuity. They basically hold it until you can claim it. And I had a small amount. I had some, I think it was an old Roth IRA that I found in Boston using the same site. And that one required me to show proof of residence and like a utility bill and a bunch of other things to claim it. This one, though, was easy because I was only 8 at the time. They didn't make me prove that I had a utility bill from where I live.
So you,
and I managed to claim that.
Let me make sure I got this straight, because you've got to be the luckiest person in the world. So you...
I know, I feel like it.
By the way, I had forgotten this, but I remember it now that you mention it, because it was one of the money tools of the day that I mentioned in a previous podcast, this missingmoney.com. Mm-hmm. And I talked about you finding your money. So you found money twice, not just once. So lightning does strike twice. And then didn't you find money?
Well, it was actually, I found it all together.
I see.
The site first found the Boston ones, and then or the Massachusetts ones, and when I went back to look it up, it had found the other one.
And didn't you find money for your brother?
Oh, well, I just found that, actually, and I emailed him about it just recently, and he's moving right now. He just moved to a new house, so like I said, they have to hold on to it forever.
You didn't find any money for the DoughRoller, did you? Any for me? Nothing?
I looked up your name, but I didn't see
No,
anything.
it's seriously though, it is it's very easy to use website, and you can go quickly. And if you're like me, you can get there quickly, put in your information, and be disappointed. If you're like Stephanie, hopefully you'll put in your information and you'll find some money. So
I do encourage people to go more than once because they update it.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
You find things over time, especially if you're like me and you've moved multiple times. It's easy to forget an old account. Somebody's trying to refund you some money from your cable bill if you're really lucky. Cable never pays me anything, but.
Well, I'll have to take that advice and check it out again, because it didn't work for me the first time. But so one question, I appreciate your time today. I got one question though on the student loan. So it sounds like there was a period of time when you were both paying off your student loans and contributing to your 403b and other investments. Is that right?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
How did you figure out between those two priorities? How much to put towards your debt and how much to put towards saving?
Initially, what I did was I moved out. I just put the same sort of minimum amount that I had in on my student loan. It took me probably 6 months here to sort of figure out how my new salary was going to work, what my actual take-home pay was going to be, to change my withholding, because as a resident, as a fellow, I had a lot of deductions and I wasn't making very much, so I got most of it back. So I wanted to get my, dabble in the 403b, figure it out before I started doing more. Once I got X percent into my 403b and I felt comfortable living off of, what I was getting as take-home pay, that's when I knew how much I could put in to start paying down my student loan.
Okay.
But really, I paid probably a little bit more each month, but I used windfalls to help pay it down.
Yeah.
Like if I got that money, I would pay it down in a chunk. And I got the FICA refund, I paid it down in a chunk.
Yeah.
And I got,
go ahead.
Tax refund. That's how I ultimately, the year I paid it off, I think I got the FICA refund and my tax refund, and it was enough to just cover it. And I felt so good doing that. It just gave me such peace of mind. And my student loans were at 4.5%, maybe down to 4.25% after I refinanced, which I don't know if that's high or low compared to today's standards. I know that some of my friends have student loans in the 6.5% range,
right?
Which is a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, I think your approach is a good one. I know there are some that suggest you should pay off all your debt first, or your non-mortgage debt first. Unless your interest rates are crazy, I think that's generally a mistake because some people could be paying off their different loans for 10 years and, or 5 years, and, you're not going to save anything and invest. So I think you took a really good approach, and it's obviously worked out for you. So before I let you go, any books you've mentioned Women and Money, right, by Susie Orman. Any other books, personal finance or investing that you've read that you think really resonated with you think others might enjoy?
I wish I could tell you. Yes, I do most of my reading online now.
Okay.
And I do a lot of articles and other things. I read actually quite a lot of your articles recently.
Okay.
But I haven't actually sat down with a book since I first started learning, mostly because of the timing.
Yeah. Well, how about websites and
Mm.
blogs? What do you like to read when you're online? Where do you go for your
Well,
financial
I love your
information?
blog, and now
Thank
that
you.
I found it, I have gone to the Motley Fool,
Yep.
and they have articles sometimes that I find helpful, but I found that when I signed up, I got a lot of sort of buy this investment sort of things, and I don't like getting things telling me I should buy or invest in something.
Yeah.
But I thought that some of their basic articles, explaining how things work were good, and Investopedia sometimes has useful sort of break it down for me. How does this work?
Yep.
And my brother sends me great articles from the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good. Well, anything I haven't asked you that I should have, or anything else you want to share with us?
Oh, gosh. Actually, when you talk to the personal capital people, see if they can make a feature where it will segregate out your Roth and non-Roth sort of types of things. So you can get a good idea of what your allocation is between non-taxable and ultimately taxable accounts. That's one thing I was hoping they would do sometime.
I think they can do that.
Yeah?
Well, hang on. Yeah. So I'm trying to, let's see here. Is this my asset allocation? I've actually got my personal capital account up.
I'll open mine up now.
Give me allocation. So for those listening, you'd go to investing and then portfolio, and then you can select allocation. And so I'm looking at my allocation now. It's 40% U.S. stocks, 30% international stocks, 11% in alternatives, 17% U.S. bonds. I got a little bit of international bonds and some cash. But if you look, I don't know when you get there, Stephanie, if you're at your account.
I'm getting it right now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Above the pretty box with all the colors that show you your allocation, you'll see a drop down that says all accounts.
Let me see. Are you in allocation?
Yep, investing, portfolio, and then you click the allocation tab, and you see this you see this pretty.
I'm getting there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be the page with the pretty colored box. You see that it says all accounts above it?
Yes.
Okay, if you click that, you can now unselect all these accounts and go in and just pick one account.
Ah.
And then it shows you your allocation just for that one account.
Nice.
There you go. Yeah, actually, I use that a lot when I'm doing my monthly sort of update in my spreadsheet, where I want to look at just the way I use it most of the time is when I want to separate out retirement versus taxable accounts.
Yeah, exactly.
The other way I use it is on the cash flow. So if you go to banking, and by the way, for those listening, if you've never used personal capital, I recognize this may not make a whole lot of sense, but if you do use it, these are handy tools. If you go to banking and then cash flow, what I can do is by choosing the accounts that I want, which I usually just focus on investment accounts, and the date range, and look at income, what it will show me is just my income from my investments. If you select all accounts, it'll show my paycheck because I connect my bank account. But if I just limit it to investments, and maybe that's all you have connected anyway, like for example, I'm looking at my dividends and interest that I earned in June, which is something that is so easy to kind of forget about because you just reinvest it. And that's fine. Frankly, it's fine to forget about it. You reinvest your interest in dividends, and you don't have to worry about it. But like I said, I kind of probably spend too much time on this than I should. So I want to see, okay, well, particularly on a month where it's at the end of a quarter where more dividends are paid in June, for example, last month, it shows me my dividends and interest for the month. And but again, being able to select the accounts is what makes that really happen. So. Well, there you go. Well, good. Well, hey, Stephanie,
Fantastic.
Listen, I appreciate your time. It sounds like you're doing fantastic. Good luck with your career. And
thank you.
Again,
thank you so much for all the great advice and your fantastic podcast. I listen to it as much as possible, and I'm actually re-listening to some of the older ones because I learn something new every time I listen to even one of your old podcasts.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate it. It's fun to do. And like I tell everyone, if there are ever topics or questions you want me to cover or whatever, don't hesitate to shoot me an email. I'm happy to do that.
Awesome.
So, well, great. Listen, Stephanie, again, thank you so much.
Thanks, Rod. Have a great day.
Well, I hope you enjoyed Stephanie in the interview. And as always, if you have any questions for me or if you have questions for Stephanie, I'm happy to pass on an email to her from you. You can email me at dr@DoughRoller.net. Happy to get your emails. As I said, if they're for her, I'm happy to forward them on onto her. One of the things she mentioned in an email after the podcast is that another source is Forbes. She reads a lot of Forbes articles. In the interview, we talked about kind of where she gets her information from, and that's always something I like to ask folks: what books do you read that you like? What websites do you read or follow that you like, and that sort of thing. And so I did that and asked her those questions. But I know one that she'd left out was Forbes. I write for Forbes, so I follow a lot of the different contributors on Forbes very closely. Another good resource for you all to check out. Well, that brings this episode to a close. Have a great day, and remember, until next time, the best thing money can buy is financial freedom.